All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at one of the most fascinating and, frankly, kind of terrifying structural tensions happening in the business world right now. On one side, we've got record-breaking, history-making infrastructure spending. But on the other side, we're hitting a massive growing wall of consumer rejection. We're diving into some deep analysis today from AI Weekly to figure out how the 2026 AI market turned into this high-stakes collision between what the tech giants are building and what the rest of the world actually wants. So, let's get into it. Here's our quick roadmap. First, we'll cover the $725 billion bet. Second, the demand-side collapse. Third, the real cost of AI slop. Fourth, how platforms are actively pushing back. And finally, the warning signs flashing at the very top. Chapter 1, the $725 billion bet. Let's look at this historic gamble. Okay, we really need to wrap our heads around the sheer, mind-boggling scale of the supply side right now. $725 billion. That is the total projected 2026 capital expenditure, or CAPEX, on AI infrastructure by the hyperscalers. To put that crazy number into perspective, Alphabet and Microsoft are spending roughly $190 billion each, and Amazon is hitting $200 billion this year alone. I mean, they are building data centers and hoarding chips at a pace we have literally never seen before in the history of tech. And if you want to understand just how locked in these companies are to this trajectory, just look at Anthropic. They recently committed $200 billion to Google Cloud over 5 years. Let's break that down. That means they're spending $40 billion a year starting in 2027. That single commitment makes up over 40% of Alphabet's entire disclosed revenue backlog. The supply side isn't just betting big here, they are practically betting the whole shebang. But here is where we hit the massive contradiction. You have $725 billion pushing hard from the supply side, but what about the demand? Well, an MIT GenAI study tracking corporate projects reveals that a staggering 95% of them are yielding absolutely zero return on investment. Zero. So the capital is definitely flowing out, but the value, it's just not flowing back in. Which brings us to Chapter 2, the demand-side collapse. Consumers are actively rejecting AI. We really have to explore how the market is actively recoiling from exactly what these hyperscalers are spending hundreds of billions to build. Gartner's 2026 consumer data is absolutely shocking. Half of all U.S. consumers say they actively prefer brands that don't use generative AI. 58% actually trust a brand less if they use it. On top of that, 54% are reporting outright AI fatigue. And functionally, if you're a brand using AI content, you're getting slapped with a 20 to 35% engagement penalty compared to human-made stuff. So consumers aren't just ignoring AI, they are actively punishing the brands that push it. And, it's not just the everyday consumer feeling this way. The enterprise sector is backing up this sentiment entirely. A National Bureau of Economic Research paper found that 90% of surveyed firms report virtually zero productivity impact from their AI deployments. The core promise of enterprise AI, that it's going to make companies vastly more efficient, well, it simply isn't materializing in the real world. And this enterprise failure is translating into massive real-world business impacts. Take Microsoft Copilot, for example. It's essentially the flagship enterprise AI product, right? Well, it lost a massive 39% of its market share in just 6 months. And the primary reason users are leaving? They simply don't trust the outputs. People are jumping ship because the product just isn't reliable enough to do real work. So, Chapter 3, the cost of AI slop. We're going from internet meme to actual fraud. To really understand this massive drop in demand, we have to define the core problem. Now, AI slop started as just internet slang for low-quality AI-generated junk. But today, we need to redefine it formally. Slop is no longer just a meme. It is a critical consumer-side data point and a leading macroeconomic indicator. It's actually become the foundation for an entire fraud economy. Just look at the deepfake ring known as Haotian AI. They recently ran an organized operation using real-time face swaps on WhatsApp and Zoom and scammed high-net-worth targets out of $4 million. This is the reality of the ecosystem we're looking at right now. Moving to Chapter 4, platforms push back. The internet is building defenses. Because of all this fraud and the flood of poor-quality content, the foundational platforms of the internet are actively building walls to defend themselves. I mean, English Wikipedia editors held a historic vote banning AI-generated content, 40-2, declaring the base text of any article must be human-written.
The foundational protocol CURL literally had to shut down its security bug bounty program because their team was completely overwhelmed by automated AI slop submissions. And major book publishers, including heavyweights like Elsevier and Macmillan, are hitting Meta with a massive class action lawsuit, alleging they pirated 267 terabytes of training data.
And the impact on developer communities? It's staggering. Stack Overflow went from a peak of over 200,000 monthly new questions down to barely 3,800 in December 2025. Guys, that is a 78% year-over-year collapse. Now sure, some of that is definitely users migrating over to ChatGPT, but the underlying story here is a dramatic structural failure. The community trust eroded significantly faster than the moderation team could rebuild it against a total flood of poor quality, AI-generated answers.
This pushback extends straight into search as well, -58%. That number represents the massive collapse in top page click-through rates, which is entirely driven by Google AI overviews, pushing organic links down the page. Because of this, publisher referral traffic is down 33% globally across 2,500 news sites. The basic foundational compact of the web, where publishers create content and search engines send them traffic, is actively breaking, and that threatens the survival of the very sites you and I visit every single day.
Finally, Chapter 5, Warning Signs at the top. The consequences are arriving. We are now witnessing severe downstream macroeconomic consequences tied directly to this crazy CapEx build-out. Microsoft is reportedly weighing a retreat from its ambitious 2030 carbon-negative pledge because, well, AI training has pushed its emissions up 24%. Apple just had to settle a $250 million class action because they marketed AI features for Siri that they severely delayed shipping. But the biggest red flag? SoftBank cut its OpenAI margin loan target by 40%, down to $6 billion, after lenders pushed back on valuation. That right there is the very first major credit-side flinch from a high-profile backer. And honestly, it is scaring the people in charge. Listen to this admission, paraphrased from recent interviews with outgoing Coca-Cola CEO James Quincy and Walmart CEO Doug McMillon. They essentially stated that the unpredictable nature of this next wave of AI was a key reason they decided to step down. Think about that for a second. The leaders of two of the most stable, blue-chip consumer brands in the entire world are looking at this market and deciding they just don't feel equipped to navigate it. Because the math is getting terrifying. Morgan Stanley's models place the current AI spending ratio astronomically higher than the absolute peak of the dot-com bubble. They project a 37% capex to sales ratio by 2028. For some context, at the height of the late 90s dot-com boom, that number only reached 22%. They're projecting that data center debt alone will clear $1 trillion. And when the major banks start talking like this, you really need to pay attention. Goldman Sachs recently published a note openly stating that FOMO, the fear of missing out, is driving AI spending more than actual business fundamentals. When a massive sell-side institution openly explains hundreds of billions in spending as pure psychology rather than sound economics, it usually means we are very, very late in the cycle. So I want to leave you with a really provocative question to consider, straight from an AI Weekly Reader poll. When users finally stop accepting AI slop altogether, what actually happens to this $725 billion bubble? Does it pop dramatically within the next 12 months? Does it deflate slowly over 2 to 3 years? Does the quality somehow miraculously improve before the money runs out? Or does this incredible historic infrastructure capex just keep it artificially inflated? The data is moving incredibly fast and attention is only getting tighter. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.